Well, I hope by the end of today, you all won't be severely afraid to even log into your systems. But it is an important conversation to have as we think about digital inclusion. Cyber threats are not just a technical issue, they are a central risk to global economies, to critical infrastructure, and to public trust. And so that's what we're going to dig into today. Let's think big picture, all right? Really big picture, and then we're going to narrow it down little by little. So from a big picture perspective, what is the most urgent threat that leaders aren't talking about?
Happy to start. I think while we're talking about big picture too, it's important to just frame some of the dollar amounts. We're talking about almost $10 trillion of cybercrime. That is the third largest economy if you think about GDP of US and China. So it's a big thing. There's a lot of threats. It's not one hacker in a room somewhere doing something on their own. It's huge. And I think maybe that's one thing is we don't think about the enormity of the nation states that are backing this and how many resources are behind it. It really is huge.
You know, I think that the problem with cybersecurity panels is at some level that we all talk about the dollars and the risk and the fear. And I think that as a result, a lot of times leaders get into this almost position of nihilism around cybersecurity where they feel like there's nothing they can do. And so they almost bury their heads in the sand. And I actually am pretty optimistic. I think we can get ahead of these challenges. And I think if you look at, especially institutions that are newer, that are digital native, a lot of them have really architected their systems in a way that they can be secure from the beginning. And that's what I see, and that's the optimism that I have. And so I think and this is a little bit of a twist on your question, but the thing that I think that leaders aren't thinking about enough is that there is something that they can do, that they can actually get ahead of the problem, and that it isn't nihilistic.
That's a great point. That's a great point. Lisa, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I want to build on that. There's a lot we all can do. So I think we've done a really great job of putting all of our lives in the digital space, right? We live a very digital existence these days, and we've done a great job of getting everybody online, but we haven't necessarily done a great job of teaching everybody how to use technology safely and securely. So I think in some ways the threat, it's not so much about the threat, it's about us as users. And we've all had bad habits, right? I mean, we've all reused a password maybe one too many places. We've all done these things. Even the cybersecurity people sitting up here, we have occasionally done things or clicked on a fish. So I think the way we talk about it and the fear that gets expressed so often, the imagery, the hackers in the hoodies, all those things is off-putting for people who don't work in the space. And so I think we can be doing more to be more inclusive about the way we even talk about it and less fear-inducing.
I agree. I tend to think that we aren't talking enough about the same things that we should have been talking about a while back, right? Like the adversary wants us to chase the shiny object. The adversary wants us to chase AI and leave some of the other things on the table, the things that we're going to be talking about next week at another big conference. They actually want us to meet and go towards a different direction. And I'm going to go towards that direction because I have an AI question for you. But I think what we're not talking enough about are the basics, right? We're all now dug into AI. So now that we've jumped all the way into AI, how is AI changing the landscape now? And that's I want you to think from an offensive and a defensive standpoint, from the attackers and the defenders. How is AI now and machine learning changing that landscape?
I think the first thing is prepare yourself. There are going to be a series of horrible headlines over the course of the next 24 months. Family loses life savings because evil criminal gang convinced them that their daughter was locked up in a Mexican prison because they replicated their voice with AI or things like that. Those will sound incredibly scary, and they will actually provoke a lot of hysteria in regulatory bodies and other places, but they will actually be the exception, not the rule. I actually think that AI is making us more secure, not less secure. There are going to be a bunch of things we can't rely on anymore. We're not going to be able to trust that just because someone sounds a certain way over the telephone that they really are them. But that's actually a good thing. That's going to get us to much more secure places where we can use things that actually really do identify you as you in a way that is very difficult for even an AI to spoof. And so what we see at Cloudflare is that we see so much of the internet's data. We're able to run it through our own machine learning systems, where our own AI tools are now identifying cybersecurity threats that no human had identified before. And that means that we're going to be able to stop the bad guys more effectively. We're doing that every single day. At the end of the day, whoever has the most data wins in the age of AI, and the good guys have more data than the bad guys. And so I think I'm actually optimistic again that AI makes us safer, not less safe. And while there are going to be some horrible headlines, that's not the real story.
Yeah, I'm glad also that Matthew said machine learning, because I think we think about AI as large language models, we think about the spoofing, we think about all the things that it does do. But AI and this renaissance, if you will, of all these new models coming out can process this machine data in ways that humans never could process the data. So I completely agree. I think you have to fight AI with AI, and I think there's a lot of good that's coming out of this renaissance.
I'm glad you said that, because I always think of AI fighting AI. So it's a constant battle between AI identities and AI personas, kind of, really seeing who's going to win. And you're right, it boils down to a data issue. Lisa.
I'm glad these defenders feel optimistic, because we work with the public and public education, and so I don't quite feel that optimism quite yet. What we're seeing are the deepfakes, right? The phone calls and the video calls. And I think this is potentially going to have, in the short term, a disproportionate effect on small businesses. Because if that voice on the phone sounds like your boss asking you to wire money or whatever.
Go buy Apple gift cards.
Yeah. It's going to be really, really convincing. And I think for small businesses that are moving really quickly, those type of social engineering situations that are now fueled with high quality, very efficient and effective and cheaply available technology for the bad guys, I think it gets harder and harder to detect those things. And if you're a small business, you might not also have a lot of documented processes on this is what has to happen here before we transfer money to somebody. So I think, unfortunately, there's a lot of education to be done there yet, and that's our mission. So we're working on that.
I agree with you, and I think Matthew, you brought up a very, very important word, which is trust, right? It's really an attack on trust, and I actually think it's going to be attack on, we've looked at deep fakes and we've said, the deep fake is going to be the CEO, a deep fake of a CEO. And I don't really think so. I think it's going to be a deep fake of a help desk person. And that person's going to call and say, I'm going to authenticate you. This is our new way of authenticating you into the network. And you're going to be like, wow, this is a great idea. Let me give you my information. And you're going to be fooled. And I think that's where deep fakes are going. It's going to be a huge pivot and a huge shift. And I agree. I think small businesses are really going to be impacted. What can private sector do to help small businesses? And what should small businesses be doing? Lisa, I want you to take that first, because you brought up small business.
We attack that head on. We have a small business education program. There's a lot of great content out there for small businesses. Mastercard has fantastic content. It's really hard to get them to engage with it. So we have an instructor-led course that teaches them about cybersecurity in business terms. So no jargon, there are no stupid questions. You have a live instructor you can ask questions of and have discussion with other students, and it's only an hour a week for 6 weeks. But it's teaching them how to manage cyber risk like they would any other risk to their business. So they probably have somebody doing IT for them in-house, or they have a managed services provider. They don't always know even what questions to ask to hire that person or how to manage that person. They can have an educated conversation with their accountant on their finances, but as soon as you start to talk to them about their use of technology, or you say the dreaded cyber word, then sometimes they can kind of glaze over. So we really hold their hand and walk them through it. and help them work on a plan so that they're resilient when something bad does happen.
I think the other thing is that security just really needs to be table stakes in every product that's out there. It's got to be part of every different system. And so I think that what we've done at Cloudflare has always been how, for all of the things that we do around the network, can we embed security into it, and then can we make it available not only inexpensively and in many cases for free, but then also how can we make it as easy as possible. But I think other companies like Google, has had a huge new focus around security, really sees that as something that is driving a differentiation in their product. Microsoft is following suit. And so I think all of these things are actually encouraging that if security gets built into those underlying products, you don't have to be a cybersecurity expert. You don't have to think about cybersecurity as much. It can be the vendors that you rely on, including folks like Mastercard, that can help you and help small businesses be more secure online.
Right. I tend to think of it, cybersecurity should be like a utility, right? You turn your water on, you turn the faucet, you think and you hope, and you don't even have to pray. The water's going to come out of it if you turn it on. I think same thing with cybersecurity. You install an app, you initiate an application. It should be secure in the background. It should happen. It should work. I'm going to ask a slightly different question for you, Colin. Are we keeping up? I mean, you get to see a lot of the threats. You know a lot that's going on. Are we keeping up, and are we at a point where we may be outpacing?
In this area, I'm actually an optimist as well. And I think we are keeping up with a lot. I think there's a lot of hysteria that you hear about, but I think nobody ever gets recognized for all the things that they actually stop. But teams are stopping an enormous amount of threats from coming in. And I think that's one of the things, that if there's one that's missed, you hear about it, it's all over the headlines. The billions and trillions that have been caught and have been shut down by networks, by threat intelligence, you don't hear about those as much. One other thing I think that is helping a lot is automation is really important here. I think it's important for small business and able to help them when they don't have skills or people to do these things. And I think that is something else that's happening that often gets labeled in with AI. But there is a lot of automation happening that is performing these jobs to keep up. And I actually think the world is doing a pretty good job.
We've talked about, big picture. We've kind of talked about small businesses. I want to leave everyone in this room with something that they can do to help make sure their organizations are secure. And as you all are listening to this advice, I always tell people everything that you're doing at work, you can do at home. So if we're saying no passwords at work, you should think about how to implement that at home. If we're saying, close ports at work, you can close ports at home. Just think about that and think about the advice that they're giving and how you can implement it in your home and friends' environments and et cetera, because then that really, really helps. So what are some of the things that people can take away? What's your call to action? What can they do today?
One thing I always recommend that organizations do is go through the exercise of what you're going to do if and when something happens. It's a great way. It almost has nothing to do with technology. It's crisis management. But just think about if we got hit with this, who would we call? Who would we verify it with internally? What would we do as a team? How do we communicate to a board or to other stakeholders? And I think we talk a lot about technology, and technology is wonderful, but so much to me is about how great organizations handle the protocol. And I think whether you're a small organization or a Fortune 50 organization, it's a great exercise to do.
Agreed.
I think for small businesses, for businesses generally, probably the best advice is move to the cloud. You shouldn't be running your own mail server anymore. You shouldn't be running your own web server. You shouldn't be running a server yourself anymore. The more that you can have that run by experts, the cybersecurity team that Microsoft can hire, the cybersecurity team that Google can hire, the cybersecurity team that Cloudflare can hire, is always going to be way better than you as even a Fortune 500 business are going to be able to hire. And so, we're a very sophisticated organization. We don't run our own mail servers. We outsource that to Google because they are better at that for it. And I think anywhere you can do that is a big deal. And then the other, piece of advice is, as an individual, every single place you can, turn on two-factor authentication.
Absolutely.
And again, there are ideal ways to do it. There are not as ideal ways to do it. Frankly, it doesn't matter. Any way that you do it, if it's sending you a text message or if you got a little app on your phone, whatever way you can do that, that additional level of protection will solve 99.9% of the security problems that you're going to have. And so especially on your email account, especially on your bank account, anything that touches money or touches the ability to get into another account like your email address does, those are the places just to make sure every single person in your family has two-factor authentication on.
I'm going to double click really quick on your moving things to the cloud. Cloud providers know exactly what they're doing. They do it very well. You know, we don't do it personally ourselves very well. We mess up with that. That's the same argument I use with my husband, and now I have a personal chef. Go ahead.
So I'm going to second what he said about MFA. Some MFA is better than no MFA. So if you read some article somewhere saying, oh, you shouldn't use it if it's a text, for example, it's better to use it than to not use it at all. That's one of the 4 core things that we preach all year long, not just during October, Cybersecurity Awareness Month, but it's your password habits, so not using the same password everywhere, using long, complex passwords. You probably need a password manager to help you do that. MFA, keeping all your stuff up to date, your operating system, your antivirus, things like that. And then really, I mean, we're here today talking about, financial inclusivity. Scams and fraud and all social engineering really has just been booming for the bad guys. So avoiding those situations, we're all getting the texts. It used to be we all got the Nigerian prince emails. Now we get the toll.
I'm still waiting for him.
Or whatever. Yeah. So, and especially protecting the people who would be the most devastated in these types of losses. So for a lot of us, that's our aging parents. For me, it's my aging parents and my aunt who I've had to rescue from scams. But these things are really, really devastating. And so just knowing what to look for, especially the ones that are AI enabled these days, and just being careful, and then helping those in your life or in your community that are less educated about these things and more likely to react to the panicked grandparent scam phone call, for example. So.
Very good. Thank you all so much. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you.
Thank you.